Hello, friends. I'd like to address a really important question that's very complicated, and that is, what does it mean to be a man? And in our day and age, this question, as well as what does it mean to be a woman, are very complex. So I'd like to provide some analytical insight here, as well as some grounding in the relevant science and culture. So the first question is, how are you going to define the question? Is it a biological question, such as biological sex differences, which means asking the question of what are males like versus females, because there definitely is an answer to that question. There are biological sex differences between males and females. Or is it a question of cultural norms? What should a man be like? And I think the answer is that it's going to be both of these things, because both are really important in understanding this question. We cannot deny that there are biological sex differences, and we cannot also deny that there are cultural norms that go on top of those sex differences to interpret and value each of those norms. For example, men are generally more likely to be represented in prison populations because they are more likely to be violent, especially in the tail end of the highest levels of aggression. That's most likely due to a biological sex difference from testosterone. But a cultural norm might interpret that higher propensity towards violence and chasten it in a certain way. Whereas, say, somebody was living in a warrior culture or like a hunter-gatherer society, that natural propensity for violence could be glorified. So the more people you kill, the more manly you are. Whereas in a, for example, Christian society, male violence is, especially when it's antisocial and leads to that kind of chaos, is taboo. And the aggression impulse is channeled into other avenues, such as protecting one's family, protecting one's nation, providing for others, and so on. So we need both levels of analysis. So the way we're going to get at this question is I'm going to analyze this very famous poem by Rudyard Kipling, who was a British Nobel Prize winner in literature from the 20th century. I'm going to both analyze it in terms of its literary qualities, but also I'm going to give a scientific evaluation about whether it's worth anything and how we should think about the question in general about what it means to be a man. So hang with me here. Here is Rudyard Kipling. He's got this Victorian look to him, and he's definitely a man of his time, very talented writer, and I think that's why he got the Nobel Prize. He was considered one of England's favorite poets, and one of his poems was the nation's favorite, particularly the one I'm going to analyze with you. So this is a very famous poem. And also Muhammad Ali, the boxer, carried this poem in his wallet and apparently inspired him tremendously. So I think it'll possibly inspire you, also get you thinking. Here it is. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet, don't look too good or talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stop and build them up with worn out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose, and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will, which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So Kipling, it seems to have been writing this poem to a young boy to instruct him on what it means to be a man when he grows up. So let's jump into this. So if you can keep your head when all about you, we're going to go line by line and really jump into what this means. What does this mean? And everyone's losing theirs and blaming it on you. So the definition here is keeping your head. He's referring to staying calm. Everyone else is losing their head. They're panicking. The meaning, I think, is that you want to stay composed even when everyone around you is panicking or accusing you unfairly. So there is this sense of the virtue here of self-control and calmness under pressure. Sometimes the language is difficult to understand because it's a different century, but it's high English and it still resonates, I think, with modern English today. So self-control and calmness, that's the virtue that's being represented here. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. Here, make allowance means understand and tolerate. Can you still tolerate other people's doubting of you, their criticism of you? So what it means is that you want to have confidence in yourself, but you also want to understand why others might be skeptical of you instead of just dismissing them and getting angry at them. And here, the virtue, I think, is confidence with humility. You want to believe in yourself, but you don't want to become arrogant. And then trusting yourself when other people doubt you, there's another virtue in that, which is being a little bit disagreeable. So you don't have to always go along with everyone, because there's a sex difference in agreeableness. But then if you don't make allowance for what other people are saying, you're going to build self-deception into yourself. Like a dictator who doesn't take criticism well and therefore winds up falling into a ditch because their policies are stupid. You have to incorporate criticism wisely. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, and here the meaning is more straightforward, be patient and persistent. Many good things in life require waiting and persistence, and things are going to take time. So you have to have this virtue of endurance in the face of delay. Many things in life happen only because we delay gratification and because we endure over time. And endurance is seen as often like a more masculine trait. Or being lied about, don't deal in lies, meaning even if others are spreading false rumors about you, don't stoop to dishonesty in return. So there's a moral quality here that if something bad is being done, don't multiply the badness, step above the badness and do something good. And I think here you see some of the Christian background, turning the other cheek, forgiveness. So you have this non-eye for an eye culture. You don't want to just have this vengeance culture where you pluck out my eye, I pluck out your eye, which leads to cycles of vengeance. So I think that's part of the background culture here. And there's some integrity and honesty here as the virtue, staying truthful despite provocation. So if someone's lying about you, you could also lie about them, but there's a virtue of truthfulness. And again, the religious culture in the background of this poem is there because if one believes in God, we would say that all truth is God's truth, and there's a virtue to truthfulness as opposed to dishonesty. All right. In addition, or being hated, don't give away. Sorry, delete that. Or being hated, don't give way to hating. So if someone hates you, don't let yourself become hateful in return. Again, you see this Christian ethic of turning the other cheek, forgiving, moving on, being the better person, thinking about the higher calling, forgiveness and emotional resilience, rising above hatred, focusing on positive core responses, which takes resilience and which takes a norm of forgiveness. In addition, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. Here, we could take this to mean don't be pretentious. Don't act superior to other people, even if you have strengths that are moral or intellectual. Don't show off. And this Victorian culture of humility and this Christian virtue of humility is coming through here, remaining modest despite your abilities. Okay, now the next line. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, meaning yes, you should have ambitions, you should have dreams, but don't let them control you or make you unrealistic, because the dream itself can undo the dreamer, because we can get so caught up in the fantasy of the future that we don't make our plans actually work today. So you need a balance between ambition and realism. All right. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim. Here, there is a deflationary attitude towards abstract intellect. So yes, intelligence is valuable, but action is what truly matters. Don't get lost in your thoughts. Try to connect your thoughts to action. So focus on wisdom rather than just knowledge. Knowledge is great, but we need wisdom that incorporates knowledge with action and with phronesis, what Aristotle called phronesis, practical. Next, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two imposters just the same. Meaning, look, yes, there's going to be successes in life, there's going to be disasters and failures in life, but why is he calling them both imposters? Why is success and failure both imposters? I thought maybe success should be the true thing and disaster should be the imposter. No, because both of them are deceivers. Both of them are kinds of illusion, because success and failure are both temporary and they shouldn't define you. You should be defined by your purpose, by your moral mission, not by particular outcomes. Don't let success make you arrogant. Don't let failure break you, because when we become successful, a person say they win some Olympic match, they're going to jump up and down, but then they might be vulnerable to attack because they might not train or prepare for the next meet as much. and don't let failure break you. So the virtue here is a kind of stoicism and resilience, maintaining balance regardless of outcomes. And this one has, I think, a lot of wisdom in it. In addition, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. Here, knaves is a kind of English old word for dishonest people. We don't hear that word very often these days. And a trap for fools here, I think, means a misleading distortion. So generally, he's saying, can you handle hearing yourself telling truths and having that twisted by people who are dishonest? People are going to misrepresent your words for their own gain. You have to endure that without frustration. So the virtue here is, again, a kind of resilience or emotional strength and tolerance, dealing with misrepresentation, and yet having integrity to not stop telling the truth anyway, because it's very easy to just not have this reverence for truth and not have this desire to focus on the truth. You can just go along, get along. Oh my gosh, people are going to misrepresent what I say and they're going to make my life very frustrating. So there's a cost to being truthful. And as the saying goes, the love of truth is the least strong of the affections in the human heart. It's not a very common love. So the next line, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. Great imagery here, meaning like your hard work may be destroyed, but you need to have the strength to rebuild those things from nothing. You may only have worn out tools, but you need to rebuild. So the virtue here is perseverance and determination, starting over without complaint. Yes, things are going to fail, but you need to turn things to the positive. Focus on bigger purposes. Be perseverant. Lead. Show a better way. Bring people along with you. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss. So pitch and toss is a kind of gambling game from that era, but you could think of it as a gamble. Making one heap of all your winnings means, hey, look at all the things that you succeeded with, and then risking it on one kind of gamble. I don't think what he's saying here is go to Vegas and just gamble away all your money. I think what it is, he's saying, take some risks, even with everything you have, without having a fear of losing. And that requires some courage. The virtue here is courage. And remember, courage is not an absence of fear. Courage is acting in spite of fear. Too much courage is rational, and too little courage is cowardice. So courage is in the middle of those two extremes. This was Aristotle's definition of courage. Risk-taking should be calculated. It should not be irresponsible. So you want to be bold, but you don't want to be reckless. And so there's a lot of deep meaning in this one verse. In addition, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. So if you fail, accept it without complaint and rebuild from scratch. Again, you have that norm of just turning things around, being strong, leading, showing people a better way, focusing on the larger purpose, and the resilience. And the virtue here is resilience again, and humility, moving forward without self-pity. Avoiding self-pity is a very Victorian virtue. Humility, again, you have that Christian virtue. So it's not about yourself. It's not about you. Don't pity yourself. Focus on doing what's right, doing what's good. The more you focus on self-pity, the more miserable you're going to be, the less productive you're going to be. And then we have, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone. Here again, sinew and tendons, these are parts of the body representing physical strength. And forcing your heart is saying, look, your emotions are not the most important thing. Your feelings are not the most important thing. They're there. You have a heart, but you also have a will. And just like in marriage, for example, or in a relationship where you love someone, you're not going to always feel good about that person, whether it's your friends, family, parents, siblings, children, spouse. Your feelings are not always going to be amazing, but your will has to be strong so you do the right thing. So focus on the will. Don't focus on your feelings always. Don't put them first. And serving your turn long after they are gone, I think, is thinking of intergenerational service. So you're not just thinking about yourself, you're thinking about people who are going to be alive after you are gone, purposes that are going to outlive you, causes and professions, trades that are going to be there when you're dead, but also that you're serving while you're alive. So keep pushing forward even when your body and energy feel depleted. Again, the virtue here is endurance and willpower, strength of character beyond physical limits. But also, I think there's this virtue of service, as it says, serve your turn, and then focusing on generations and causes beyond your lifetime, something that will outlast you, having a sense of purpose. In addition, and so hold on when there's nothing in you, except the will, which says to them, hold on. I think this is the most memorable line, probably the most famous line, which means when everything else is going to hell, when everything is failing, The sheer determination that you have to hold on, to keep going is really important. And it doesn't say hold on when you have something to hold with. It says when there's nothing in you left. All you have is your will, which says keep going. And the virtue here is an unbreakable spirit and perseverance, which we've heard emphasized elsewhere as well. Being someone that other people will turn to in times of crisis, who is not going to fall apart, who's going to lead, who's going to be strong. And then if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, and I think what this means is that you have to engage with all kinds of people, engage with masses without compromising your morals, because what happens is as people interact with more and more people, there's more social pressure to go along and get along, fit in, believe what other people believe, make other people happy in terms of social opinion and reputation, which is very different than keeping one's virtue, because oftentimes crowds will go towards fanatical ends or become extremely conformist. So somebody who has moral principle is going to be challenged, because it takes a lot of independence of mind to not change what you're thinking when other people around you disagree with you. So the virtue is integrity in social settings. In addition, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. So be comfortable around people who are powerful, but also remain connected to ordinary people. The virtue here again is humility and social grace, respecting all people equally. And here this Victorian Christian norm of we're all made in God's image. Everyone is equal in rights. You should be humble with the gifts that you have and don't get puffed up by kings and don't lose your common humanity. In addition, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, meaning don't let enemies break you and don't let even close friends emotionally control you. This is the virtue of emotional independence and strength, a kind of stoicism or emotional invulnerability. And I think here the idea is that because people are going to turn to men in times of crisis, during war, during hurricanes. So what that means is that you have to have this emotional, basically, even when friends can hurt you, even when family can hurt you. So there's a cultivation process there. If all men count with you, but none too much, what that means is that you want to value everyone's opinions, but don't depend too much on any one person. So you want to have balanced relationships and self-reliance. So you want to be connected to people, but you also want to be self-reliant. You don't want to absorb yourself into the crowd so that you don't have an opinion anymore. And you don't want to be so self-reliant that you don't have social connectedness with people either. So all men will count with you, meaning you're really connected, but not too much. So there's a balance. Keep things in proportion. And then if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds distance run, what this means is that life is limited. So make the most out of every moment. Live life to the fullest, of course. The unforgiving minute, I think, means that boredom is a great temptation to lose one's nerve, one's purpose. The minute can be unforgiving, and distance run there is signaling purpose and meaning and moral mission. So the minute can be unforgiving, but focus on the distance run as each second is passing. Here, the virtue is efficiency and purpose, as I mentioned. And next we have yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Meaning, if you embody these virtues, son, then you will not only achieve success, but you're going to also be really mature and you're going to have a strength of character that other people are going to turn to when times are hard. I don't think this means plundering the earth in some irresponsible manner. You can see there's all kinds of virtues behind this. The world is yours to do great things, to serve others, to provide, to protect. And then finally, there's a father saying to his son, I'm going to be really proud of you. And the virtue here is personal mastery and fulfillment. So there's a higher self and a lower self, and you need to master your lower self in order to achieve great things. You cannot just turn into yourself and trust that you can express your feelings and everything's going to go great. You need to cultivate personal mastery so that your higher self comes out. That's probably a meta theme of this poem. So great. So here's a summary of these virtues. Self-control. Stay calm under pressure. Master your impulses and emotions with willpower. 2, confidence with humility. Believe in yourself, but you also have to respect others. 3, emotional resilience. Strength to handle success and failure with equal grace. You have to be emotionally resilient. Perseverance, which is determination to endure and keep going even after setbacks. Mind, you have to be self-reliant. Consider the views of others, but have the strength to say no and believe what is true and good. In addition, integrity, stay honest and true to your values. Be realistic and have moral aspiration. Courage, take risks but wisely. Don't be rash, but also don't be cowardly. Humility, avoid egotism and treat people with respect. Decisiveness, you got to act. You got to get things done. purposefulness, use your time wisely, have a moral mission. So those are the kind of general virtues that I think Kipling was getting at. Now, here's the question. Let's provide a scientific assessment of this. How can we do that? There are personality differences between sexes, and I'm going to review some of those here. So these are some of these articles you can look to. Here's what I'm drawing from. What that means is that we know that men and women are not interchangeable in their personalities. There are predictable differences in personality across cultures, across development. So what are those? The way we can analyze this is we can look at what the scientific literature says are personality differences, and then we can look at what Kipling suggests and try to see which of these ideas about what it means to be a man are grounded in the way men actually are versus the cultural part, which is an aspiration. Here's what I think men should be. All right, so getting back to the science. So men are lower in agreeableness. What that means is that they're more competitive and tough-minded and less polite. Agreeableness is one of the big 5 personality traits. And because men are more, on average, lower in agreeableness, they're less compassionate than females and also less cooperative in general. And you saw some of that in the poem that I read. Next, males are lower in neuroticism. Here, I'll make this a little bit smaller. What that means is that men, on average, are more emotionally stable versus being unstable. And the 2 domains of neuroticism are volatility and withdrawal. So volatility means how much up and down is there. And then withdrawal is how much social isolation do people have, or how much turning into themselves and ruminating do they have in light of a stressor. And again, these are on average. So you're going to have some women who are extremely low on neuroticism. Those are going to be those couple Navy SEALs women who get into the highest levels of military action, and there's going to be some men who are extremely high in neuroticism. For example, poets, probably like Kipling. Maybe he wrote this because he didn't have a lot of these virtues and he was trying to transmit them. But poets are amongst the most high in neuroticism, the personality trait of neuroticism. So males also are within the domain of openness to experience, which is another personality domain. They're less into this aesthetic sensitivity domain and emotional openness. So males are less sensitive to aesthetics and emotional openness, and more into the domain of intellectual curiosity and abstract thinking. So openness to experience has these 2 domains: aesthetic sensitivity, emotional openness, and intellectual curiosity and abstract thinking. Females predominate on one and males predominate on the other. And males are also within the domain of conscientiousness, more impulsive. And now this is really interesting because a lot of these virtues that Kipling and other types of male norms are about is about self-control. But what's interesting and surprising is that males are actually slightly more impulsive than females. So we see higher rates of substance use disorder, for example, and higher rates of ADHD in males, probably because of a baseline higher impulsivity amongst males. Also more risk-taking. Males are more sensitive to risk in terms of finding pleasure in risk, taking risks. They're going to get a higher rate of dopamine secretion for a certain amount of risk. And that is also relevant to some of the things we said before. Less orderly, so less conscientious in the domain of self-discipline, organization, and responsibility, which again is surprising given what we've heard. So what this means is that a lot of those norms are aspirational. They're not something you look and see as a sex difference between men and women. It's something that you have to cultivate. Males are also within the domain of extroversion, are less sociable and warm. So your average female is going to be more friendly and also more sociable, but also males are more assertive and excitement seeking. So that also connects to risk taking, as I mentioned, and also assertiveness, dominance. Males are less humble on average, meaning they're less modest. They're more likely to express entitlement and arrogance. That needs to be thought of too within the domain of good manliness versus bad manliness. But here we have these 2 conceptions here. We have Kipling's manly virtues and we have the scientific description of sex differences in personality between males and females. So can these be reconciled? I think they can, and here's how. So first of all, let's take a look at the fact that the following is true. Both of these are going to be emphasized. In order to be good men, there's going to be some virtue, let's call it X, that's something that men on average naturally have more of and men should build on. So for example, the testosterone I mentioned make men, for example, more dominant and more focused on leadership. So maybe that's an example of something that's both biologically based and that someone like Kipling would say that's good. We should have men leaning into that part of their nature. But there's also, as I mentioned, the fact that men can have certain traits that on average they naturally have less of. And that someone like Kipling would say, you need to cultivate that in yourself. You need to have more of that thing in order to be a good man. For example, self-control. If men are more impulsive, they actually don't have that naturally compared to females. And in order to be a good man, for someone like Kipling, men would need to cultivate that over time because they're more vulnerable to having their life spiral out of control because of their lack of self-control. So I think let's look at these virtues that Kipling mentioned and see which of those two situations they're in. So self-control, staying calm under pressure, mastering your impulses and emotions with willpower. The matching personality sex differences in males is going to be lower neuroticism, greater emotional stability. This is going to support self-control under pressure. So that's going to be an example of something that they have naturally that they should use and lean into for self-control. But impulsivity, risk-taking, less orderliness, this is going to suggest that self-control isn't ideal for men rather than a reflection of their typical personality tendencies. So you have both things leading onto self-control. Some natural strengths, but also some things that need to be cultivated. Second in virtues would be confidence with humility. So believe in yourself, but respect others. So again, lower neuroticism allows you to believe in yourself more, and higher assertiveness allows you to believe in yourself more, and greater emotional resilience and higher assertiveness contribute to confidence. So here we have nature supporting this difference, this virtue in males, but we also have something in male nature inhibiting this virtue. Males are less humble. So what this means is that this humility virtue is going to be an ideal rather than a reflection of typical personality tendencies. Men are going to have to cultivate humility. And that's probably why these cultural traditions, various religions that emphasize humility need to be cultivated over time. It's not something a young boy is going to naturally have. In addition, virtue number 3 is emotional resilience, the strength to handle success and failure with equal grace. So there, again, is lower neuroticism in males. So that's going to help with emotional resilience dramatically. There's less emotional volatility, being better at handling stress. So in this domain, males will have to lean into this part of their nature. Or if they struggle with neuroticism, they'll have to get some help to try to get that under control. In addition, virtue number 4, perseverance, determination to endure and keep going even after setbacks. Again, lower neuroticism helps with perseverance. It helps with determination in the response to setbacks. Neuroticism in general is a definition that only makes sense in context of responding to stressors. So somebody who's lower on neuroticism is going to respond to a stressor with less of emotional reactivity and negative emotion compared to someone with higher levels of neuroticism or emotional instability. So here, higher risk-taking and assertiveness also support perseverance, because perseverance is in many ways a risk, because when you're facing a stressor, the reasonable thing to do might be to, in order to preserve yourself and to keep going, in some ways you're saying, I'm going to take a risk that this thing is going to work out. So the higher risk-taking ability and the assertiveness is going to help with perseverance as a manly virtue. But as we've seen, impulsivity, risk-taking, less orderliness, these are not natural sex differences that favor males. Males will have to think of perseverance from these sources as an ideal rather than a reflection of their typical personality tendencies. This is something that has to be cultivated. And if you look at an all males boarding school or you look at the military, oftentimes what they're doing is cultivating low impulsivity, careful risk-taking, more orderliness, because males don't necessarily have that as much to begin with. So if you throw a typical guy into a totally unstructured environment when they're 12 years old, they're not going to do as well. Similarly, his virtue number 5, independence of mind, self-reliance, consider the views of others, but have the strength to say no and believe what's true and good. So the sex difference here would be lower agreeableness. That's pretty clear across a lot of cultures. Being low on agreeableness will allow people to have more independence of mind, more abstract thinking as well. Being more abstract in your thinking is going to not get you caught into concrete details. Rely less on social approval. Intellectual curiosity fosters independent thought. Yeah, so lower agreeableness pretty definitely can be leaned into for independence of mind. All right, Kipling's manly virtue number 6 is integrity, staying honest and true to your goals. And the matching personality sex difference here is going to be a little bit less clear. It's more mixed evidence because lower agreeableness and conscientiousness may actually mean less integrity on the part of males. So it might be something they need to cultivate. So this is going to be more of an ideal for males that they need to cultivate rather than a typical thing of their personality that they can lean into. I think, again, in military cultures and boarding schools, integrity being cultivated into men because of that, probably. Virtue number 7 is ambition, having realistic but also moral aspirations. Ambition is not just kind of psychopathic ambition. It has to have this moral component to it for being a good man. And the matching personality sex difference is higher assertiveness and excitement seeking. So if males are more assertive by nature, more excitement seeking by nature, they're going to also be more ambitious. higher risk taking also because ambition is a risk. When you're taking like starting a company or taking a gamble on something that's really low probability but high reward, that is something that if somebody is more higher on risk taking, they're going to be more ambitious generally. But less neuroticism and agreeableness is also going to help when somebody's trying to be ambitious, because if you're having a lot of neuroticism or emotional sensitivity, then an opportunity is going to be more something that you worry about, turn over in your mind, have rumination about. And if somebody's agreeable, they're not going to be as ambitious because they're going to want to get along with other people more. And therefore, an ambitious goal is often going to violate social norms and also going to go against convention. Being more disagreeable on the part of males will help with ambition because you don't really worry as much about what other people think. Doing something that's like starting a new venture, breaking some trend, going for some really difficult goal that nobody else wants to try for, those kind of things. So here, I think it's less about cultivation and more about leaning into that part of male nature. Manly virtue number 8 is courage. Take risks, but be wise. Don't be rash. Don't be cowardly either. And male higher risk taking helps here because there's more risk tolerance for courageous acts. Jumping when somebody's fallen onto the train tracks, that takes a lot of courage, but also if somebody's more prone to taking risks with their body, they're going to do that a little bit more easier. Lower neuroticism, also, you have less fear, and fear is a great inhibitor of courage. Lower agreeableness and more assertiveness. So these are also allowing people to act without consensus and social support. So a lot of courageous acts require people to be disagreeable. They don't just imagine that there's invasion of a city and everyone agrees it's better to just hide. And somebody says, no, I'm going to go and confront these people who are invading the city, try to tell them to go away and try to make sure they know that they can't mess with us. That's going to take the ability to say no to other people who are telling you to just hide from everybody. But there's other examples like that. In addition, we have virtue number 9, which is humility, avoiding egotism, treating all people with respect. Now, this is going to match the personality difference for men of lower agreeableness, which is definitely associated with less humility. Humility in this conception of manliness is a good thing, but males being less agreeable is associated with more egotism. So that's going to be a problem. So males are going to be less modest and less polite. This is going to be an ideal for men rather than a reflection of their typical personality tendencies. And again, this is more of like the Christian background of this version of manliness, where it's like, hey, you don't want to be an egotistical man, psychopathic guy who's just narcissistic about themselves. And this is where the cultural component comes in, because male nature is not necessarily going in this direction, probably because of testosterone. So manly virtue number 10 is decisiveness. So what this means is action matters, get things done. So lower agreeableness, more assertiveness is going to lead to more decisiveness. People are going to be more able to act without consensus and social support, that one does not need to get approval from everyone first before they act. They're more able to make decisions independently. And higher risk taking. So if someone is able to take on risks, they're going to have a greater ability to be decisive when there are risks involved. When the right thing to do is risky, it's going to be easier to do when decisiveness is needed. Lower orderliness. If males are lower on orderliness in general, this could undermine decisiveness too, because there could be less careful deliberation with decisiveness. On the other hand, lower orderliness could contribute to more decisiveness if the decision is undermined by deliberation. So some decisions need to be made on the spot. So this one could go either way. Virtue number 11 is purposefulness, using time wisely and having a moral focus. So higher risk taking can lead to purposefulness because sometimes certain moral goals are definitely not safe to take. And higher assertiveness, more purpose-driven action, because assertiveness leads to focusing on getting things done. But if males are lower on orderliness in the domain of conscientiousness, they're not going to use their time as well, which suggests an ideal for men rather than a reflection of typical personality traits. So you have this balance. There's some parts of male nature that are leaning towards purposefulness, but there are other parts that are leading away from it that need cultivation. And the male difficulty with orderliness you can see this in any like teenager who's a boy. Difficulty with orderliness is a problem often. So if you found this helpful, if you found this insightful, I hope you have. If it's inspired you to think more deeply or to think about maybe you have a son or daughter or you're trying to understand this for yourself, hopefully it's been insightful. Check out this other video if you've liked this and feel free to join my free newsletter. Thanks so much. Take care.